Okay, well here we are multiplying again. This time we're going to do it with decimals. So that in our table of contents we're going to write multiplying decimals. Okay, we are multiplying decimals today. Okay, turning to the next available page in your journal. And guys, do your very best not to skip pages, okay? Makes your journal a lot more organized. You should go to the very next page. Okay, so we are multiplying decimals. Now, some of you asked me last week on the homework where we were doing some repeated addition with decimals, you asked me, can't we just multiply? And yes, we can just multiply. I just need to show you where to put the decimal when you multiply. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so our TEAC says that we are going to solve for products of decimals to the hundredths. Including situations involving money, using strategies based on place value understanding, properties of operations, and the relationship to the multiplication of whole numbers. That was a lot, wasn't it? And that is TEAC 5.3e. Okay, now multiplying decimals is the exact same thing as regular multiplying of whole numbers. We just got to figure out what to do with that decimal point. Okay, so I'm going to give you step-by-step instructions and how to keep track of that decimal point. All right? So, step number 1. Count decimal places in the factors and write it to the side. Okay? So let's say that this is my my problem is 81 hundredths times 7. Okay? 81 hundredths times 7. So my first step tells me that I'm going to count the decimal places in the factors. Okay, well my two factors are 81/100ths and 7, right? Okay, so how many decimal places do I have? Well, up here in 81/100ths, how many do I have? 1, 2. 2 decimal places in this factor. Are there any decimal places in the 7? No, there are not. So we have 2 decimal places in 81/100ths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write 2 over here, just so that I remember how many decimal places I have. This is going to be very important at the end of our problem. Step number 2. Multiply normally. Okay, so back to my original problem, 81/100ths times 7. Okay, well, I'm going to multiply 7 times 1 is 7. Oh, and don't forget, I have this little 2 over here. Tell me how many decimal places I have. Okay, so again, 7 times 1 is 7, and 7 times 8 is 56. Okay, so that's what I have so far. Now, we need to kind of take a look at this and think about this. Does it make sense that 81/100ths, which is a number less than 1, times 7, a number less than 1 times 7 is really going to be 576? That doesn't make sense, does it? Remember, because we're multiplying a number of less than 1. 81/100ths is less than 1. So that means we've got to do something with that decimal point. We're going to move decimal point to the left. Remove the decimal point to the left. The number of places that are in the factors. Okay, so remember, how many places are in the factors? I've had you write it down each time. Okay, so we have 81/100ths times 7. And remember over here, we counted there's 2 decimal places, right? Okay, so here we go. 7, 5, 67. Okay, and how many decimal places are there? There are 2. There's 2 in this factor. So we're going to move our decimal place to the left 2 places. 1, 2. Therefore, 5 and 76/100ths is our answer. 5 and 67/100ths is our answer. Okay. Now, thinking about that in what makes sense, this is a number of less than 1. 81/100ths times 7 is 5 and 67/100ths, not 576. That is what makes that decimal point so, so important. Okay, let's do another one together. Let's do 2 3/10 times 7. Now, I'm going to think about this very critically here. I'm going to think about this very critically. I'm going to look at 2 3/10, and in my head, remember I talked to you guys about estimating? In my head, I'm going to go, well, 2 or 3/10 is closer to rounding the number down to 2. Okay, so this is just going to be 2 times 7 is 14, right? But we know that we've got 3/10 here to multiply, so it's going to be a little more than 14. Okay, so 7 times 3 is 21. Carry the 2. Oh, remember, I had one number behind the decimal. Remember, one number behind the decimal here. 7 times 2 is 14. 14 plus 2 is 16. Okay? Now, we know that it can't possibly be 161, because this is only a little more than 2 times 7. Okay? A little more than 2 times 7. But I have one decimal place to move, right? So 1 goes right there. So it's 16 1/10. Okay? Okay. Ooh, now let's try another one. This one's a tricky one. Okay, so let's do 17 hundredths times 4 tenths. Wow, I've got decimals in both factors, don't I? I have decimals in the first factor here, and I have a decimal in the second factor here. Okay? And I am going to multiply a number less than 1 times another number less than 1. Okay? So I'm going to get a really small number here. Okay? Now, how many decimal places do I have? Well, I have 1, 2, 3. And we cannot forget this factor down here has a decimal point. 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to write 3 here so that I remember how many decimal places to move to the left. 4 times 7 is 28. Carry my 2. 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay, now, how many decimal places do I need to move? 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, uh-oh, I don't have a digit there. So I'm going to go 3, and what do you think I'm going to put here? That's right, it's going to be a 0. Okay? So the answer to this one is 68 hundredths. My point on this one is that you have to count every single decimal place in both factors. And if in your product you do not have enough digits, you have to keep going and then add some zeros. Okay? So here's some practice problems for you for tomorrow. Okay, let's do 3 and 7 tenths times 2. Let's do 40 and 7 tenths times 5. And let's do one more. Let's do 6 and 32 hundredths times 3. Okay? Come with those 3 practice problems completed. If you have to use another page of your journal, it's okay. Alrighty, see you tomorrow.